Good evening, friends. Tonight we're diving into a topic that touches us all: sleep. More specifically, the curious and sometimes downright strange ways people in the past experienced it. Before we get started, feel free to like the video and subscribe if you truly enjoy this kind of content. It helps more than you know. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now? It's always amazing to see our little community spread across the world. So, settle in, maybe dim the lights, let the room get cozy, and let's begin tonight's story together. The medieval world operated on rhythms so different from our own that their approach to sleep would seem almost alien to modern minds. These weren't people who simply went to bed when tired and woke when rested. Their relationship with darkness, rest, and the night itself was shaped by beliefs, necessities, and customs that created sleep patterns unlike anything we know today. The sacred hour of Compline. In the medieval world, the transition from wakefulness to sleep was never casual. For both religious and secular communities, the approach of night was marked by ceremony, prayer, and ritual preparation that turned bedtime into a spiritual event. The most formal of these traditions was Compline, the final prayer service of the canonical hours, observed not just in monasteries but in noble households and even among the literate peasantry who could afford prayer books. Compline was more than a simple prayer. It was a deliberate process of spiritual cleansing before the vulnerable hours of sleep. Medieval people believed that during sleep, the soul was particularly susceptible to demonic influence. Dreams could be messages from God, but they could equally be traps set by Satan. The night was when witches flew, when spirits wandered, and when the boundaries between the living world and the supernatural became dangerously thin. The service itself involved specific psalms, canticles, and prayers designed to create a protective barrier around the sleeper. Psalm 91, with its promise of protection from the terror that stalks by night, was central to these rituals. Medieval prayer books contained elaborate instructions for bedtime devotions, including the proper positioning of the body, the correct number of genuflections, and even the direction one should face while praying. In monasteries, Compline created an atmosphere of profound silence that would last until the next morning's prayers. After the final Amen, speaking was forbidden. Monks would file silently to their dormitories, moving through corridors lit only by carefully shielded candles. This enforced quiet wasn't merely about discipline. It was believed that unnecessary noise could attract malevolent spirits or disturb the delicate process by which the soul prepared itself for its nightly journey through dreams. Noble households adapted these practices to their own needs. Lady Eleanor of Aquitaine's household accounts from 1187 detail the employment of a prayer leader, whose sole responsibility was conducting evening devotions for the castle's residents. These services often lasted over an hour and included not just prayers but readings from religious texts, meditative chanting, and what medieval sources describe as the blessing of chambers. The blessing of chambers involved sprinkling holy water in each corner of sleeping areas while reciting specific prayers. Beds themselves were blessed, with particular attention paid to the head of the bed, which was believed to be the point where demonic influence was most likely to enter. Some households maintained elaborate blessing rituals that included burning specific herbs, hanging blessed medallions, and positioning crucifixes at precise angles to create what medieval texts call a sanctuary of rest. Even among peasants who couldn't read Latin or afford elaborate prayer books, Simplified versions of Compline were common. Parents would lead their children through basic prayers, and extended families would gather for brief devotional moments before dispersing to their sleeping areas. These practices were so deeply embedded in medieval culture that failure to observe some form of bedtime prayer was considered not just irreligious but actively dangerous. The transition from prayer to actual sleep was equally ritualized. Medieval sleeping guides, written by monks and physicians, provided detailed instructions for the proper way to position oneself in bed. Sleeping on one's back was discouraged as it supposedly opened the heart to demonic influence. The preferred position was on the right side, with hands folded in prayer and feet pointing toward the east, symbolically oriented toward Jerusalem and the rising sun that would bring salvation with the dawn. The architecture of medieval sleep. The physical spaces where medieval people slept were designed around principles that would seem bizarre to modern sensibilities. Privacy, as we understand it, simply didn't exist. Instead, sleeping arrangements were organized around complex hierarchies of status, practical necessities, and spiritual beliefs that created bedroom environments unlike anything in the contemporary world. The great halls of medieval castles and manor houses transformed completely at night. During the day, these spaces served as courts, dining rooms, and centers of administration. But when darkness fell, they became communal dormitories where dozens or even hundreds of people would spread out on rush mats, straw pallets, or simple wooden platforms. The lord and lady of the manor might retire to a separate chamber, but their servants, guards, guests, and various hangers-on would all bed down together in the main hall. This wasn't considered unusual or uncomfortable. Medieval people were accustomed to living in close quarters, and the concept of individual bedrooms was largely unknown outside the highest ranks of nobility. What mattered wasn't privacy but proximity to warmth sources and protection from the dangers of the night. Sleeping alone was actually considered dangerous, not just practically but spiritually. The isolated sleeper was vulnerable to demons, thieves, and the various supernatural threats that medieval people believed roamed freely in darkness. The arrangement of these communal sleeping areas followed strict protocols. Higher status individuals slept closer to the central hearth, both for warmth and as a symbol of their position in the household hierarchy. Servants and lower-ranking residents arranged themselves in concentric circles radiating outward, with the lowest status individuals sleeping near doors and windows where they would be most exposed to cold drafts and potential intruders. Beds themselves were precious possessions, often worth more than a peasant's entire annual income. A proper bed consisted of a wooden frame, a straw or feather mattress, linen sheets, woolen blankets, and elaborate hangings that served both decorative and practical purposes. These bed curtains weren't merely for show. They created a private microenvironment within the larger communal space, blocking drafts, muffling sounds, and providing a psychological barrier that allowed couples to maintain some intimacy despite being surrounded by dozens of other people. The most elaborate beds were architectural marvels. The state bed of Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy, described in inventory records from 1467, required a team of servants to assemble and included carved wooden panels, embroidered silk hangings, ermine-lined covers, and a canopy supported by silver posts. Setting up this bed for the Duke's use was a ceremony in itself, involving specific rituals for blessing each component and arranging the hangings according to precise measurements that supposedly provided optimal protection from evil influences. But even among the wealthy, beds were often shared. Married couples naturally slept together, but it was also common for siblings, friends, or guests to share a bed purely for practical reasons. Heating a medieval bedroom was difficult and expensive, so sharing body heat was a logical necessity. Guest chambers in monasteries and inns routinely contained large beds designed to accommodate 3 or 4 travelers simultaneously. The practice of bed sharing extended to relationships we would now consider highly inappropriate. It was not uncommon for adult servants to share beds with the children they tended, or for masters to share sleeping space with their apprentices. These arrangements were considered practical necessities rather than suspicious intimacies, though medieval church records do contain occasional warnings about the spiritual dangers of sleeping too close to members of the opposite sex. Medieval beds were also designed to serve multiple functions beyond sleep. During the day, they often served as seating areas, conference spaces, or even temporary offices where important business could be conducted in relative privacy. The bedchamber of Eleanor of Castile contained built-in storage compartments for documents, treasure, and personal items. Her bed itself was equipped with reading desks, writing materials, and even a small altar for private devotions. The positioning of beds within rooms followed elaborate rules based on medieval theories about health, spirituality, and cosmic influences. The head of the bed should point east toward the rising sun, symbolizing the hope of resurrection. The bed should not be placed directly under roof beams, which were believed to channel harmful spiritual influences downward onto sleeping occupants. Windows should be positioned so that the first rays of sunrise would fall across the bed, providing both physical warmth and spiritual protection. Medieval physicians developed complex theories about the relationship between sleeping environment and health. The medical text Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum provided detailed instructions for bedroom ventilation, stating that sleeping areas should be neither too warm nor too cold, neither too dry nor too humid. Bedrooms were recommended to have eastern exposures for morning light but western walls thick enough to block the potentially harmful influences of the setting sun. The economics of medieval rest. Sleep in the medieval world was shaped by economic realities that determined not just where and how people rested, but when they could afford to sleep at all. For the vast majority of medieval people, sleep was not a guaranteed nightly luxury but a precious commodity that had to be balanced against the demands of survival, work, and social obligation. The medieval economy operated on rhythms that bore no resemblance to modern work schedules. Agricultural communities followed seasonal patterns that created dramatically different sleep patterns throughout the year. During harvest time, entire villages would work from before dawn until well after sunset, snatching brief naps whenever possible but often going days with only a few hours of fragmented rest. Harvest workers developed a practice called sleep sharing, where teams would take turns resting while others continued working, ensuring that valuable crops could be gathered with maximum efficiency. Winter brought different challenges. With less daylight for productive work, medieval people might sleep for 10, 12, or even 14 hours per day during the darkest months. But this extended rest came at a cost. Fuel for heating was expensive and scarce. Families would often crowd together in single rooms, burning only minimal amounts of wood or charcoal, and relying on shared body heat to survive the cold months. Sleep became a survival strategy, a way to conserve energy and warmth during periods when food was scarce and physical activity was limited by weather. The urban economy created different sleep patterns. Craftsmen and merchants in medieval cities often worked by candlelight or rushlight well into the night, especially during busy seasons. Guild records from 13th century London describe blacksmiths working through the night to meet demand for tools and weapons, catching sleep in brief shifts between jobs. These workers developed techniques for microsleeping that allowed them to rest while still maintaining awareness of their furnaces and equipment. Medieval inns created an entire economy around temporary sleep. Travelers could purchase different grades of rest depending on their economic status. The cheapest option was often a spot on the floor of the common room, with access to the central hearth but no bedding or privacy. Mid-range accommodations might include a shared bed in a dormitory-style room. The most expensive rooms offered private beds, clean linens, and even basic washing facilities. Prices varied dramatically based on location, season, and local economic conditions. Records from the Canterbury Tales period show that a night's lodging could cost anywhere from a few pennies for basic floor space to several shillings for a private chamber with meals included. These prices were significant for medieval travelers. A craftsman's daily wage might be only 6 to 8 pence, making a night at a quality equivalent to several days' work. The economics of sleep also influenced marriage and household formation. Beds were expensive enough that they often appeared in wills and inheritance documents. A well-made bed with proper hangings, mattresses, and linens could represent a substantial investment, sometimes equivalent to a year's income for a rural family. Young couples often had to save for years to afford their own bed, and many marriages were delayed until the couple could establish a properly furnished sleeping space. Medieval households developed complex systems for managing sleeping space based on economic efficiency. Servants and apprentices might sleep in shifts, with day workers using beds vacated by night workers. Kitchen staff often slept near their work areas, both to tend fires through the night and to make maximum use of residual heat from cooking fires. Stable hands and other outdoor workers frequently slept in their work areas, using animal body heat and hay bedding to stay warm. The seasonal migration of workers created temporary sleeping economies. During planting and harvest seasons, rural areas would see influxes of temporary workers who needed short-term sleeping arrangements. Farming families supplemented their income by renting floor space in their homes, barns, or outbuildings. These temporary accommodations were basic but crucial for workers traveling between seasonal jobs. Monastic communities developed sophisticated systems for managing sleep as an economic resource. Monasteries served as medieval hotels for pilgrims and travelers, but they also operated on carefully calculated schedules that balanced prayer obligations with practical necessities. The rule of Saint Benedict specified precise times for sleep, but monastery records show that these schedules were often modified based on seasonal work requirements, local economic needs, and the practical demands of running self-sufficient communities. Even the timing of sleep was influenced by economic factors. Candles and oil for lamps were expensive, so most medieval people organized their activities around available daylight. This created sleep patterns that shifted dramatically with the seasons. Summer meant later bedtimes and earlier rising times. Winter meant longer periods of rest, but also more time spent in bed simply to conserve fuel and warmth. The medieval economy also created opportunities for specialized sleep-related professions. Professional bedmakers traveled between wealthy households, setting up and maintaining elaborate sleeping arrangements. Wakekeepers were hired to watch over sleeping children or invalid family members during the night. Some monasteries employed night watchers whose job was to ensure that sleeping monks maintained appropriate positions and didn't disturb others with snoring or restless movement. The science of medieval slumber. Medieval understanding of sleep was based on a complex blend of classical medical theory, religious doctrine, and practical observation that created approaches to rest fundamentally different from modern sleep science. Medieval physicians and scholars developed elaborate theories about what happened during sleep, why it was necessary, and how it could be optimized for health and spiritual well-being. The foundation of medieval sleep theory rested on the classical concept of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval medical texts, sleep was the result of the brain becoming temporarily dominated by cold, moist humors that slowed down mental activity and relaxed the body. Different individuals were believed to have different sleep needs based on their personal humoral balance, which was determined by factors including age, gender, diet, physical constitution, and astrological influences. Medieval physicians prescribed specific sleep positions based on humoral theory. People with excess hot, dry humors were advised to sleep on their left sides to balance their temperament with cooling influences. Those dominated by cold, moist humors should sleep on their right sides to encourage warming. Sleeping on one's back was generally discouraged because it was believed to allow harmful vapors to rise from the stomach to the brain, potentially causing nightmares or even temporary madness. The timing of sleep was also subject to medical regulation. Medieval texts recommended going to bed approximately 3 hours after the evening meal, allowing time for initial digestion but avoiding the dangers of sleeping with a completely full stomach. Rising time should coincide with the natural warming of the air that occurred just before dawn, when the body's natural heat would be strongest and most capable of dispelling the cold humors that accumulated during sleep. Medieval dream theory was particularly sophisticated. Dreams were categorized into several distinct types: somnium, symbolic dreams requiring interpretation; visio, prophetic dreams showing future events; oraculum, dreams containing direct messages from divine or supernatural sources; insomnium, dreams caused by physical discomfort or emotional distress; and phantasma, meaningless dreams resulting from poor digestion or humoral imbalance. Professional dream interpreters developed elaborate systems for analyzing the content, timing, and circumstances of dreams. A dream occurring in the early part of the night was considered less significant than one occurring near dawn. Dreams that recurred multiple times were believed to carry more weight than single occurrences. The dreamer's age, gender, social status, and recent activities all influenced the interpretation of dream content. Medieval physicians also recognized what we would now call sleep disorders, though they understood and treated them very differently. Excessive sleepiness was often attributed to an overabundance of cold, moist humors and treated with warming foods, gentle exercise, and aromatic herbs. Insomnia was typically blamed on hot, dry humors and treated with cooling foods, cold baths, and calming activities. Night terrors and sleep disturbances were often attributed to supernatural causes rather than medical ones. Medieval texts describe various forms of nocturnal afflictions caused by demons, witches, or malevolent spirits. The mare, from which we get the word nightmare, was believed to be a supernatural entity that sat on sleepers' chests, causing difficulty breathing, frightening dreams, and feelings of paralysis. Protection against the mare involved specific prayers, blessed amulets, and sleeping in certain positions that were believed to prevent spiritual attack. Medieval sleep medicine also included sophisticated understanding of the relationship between diet and rest. Medical texts provided detailed guidance on foods that promoted good sleep versus those that caused restlessness. Heavy meats were generally discouraged before bedtime, as they were believed to generate hot humors that could cause disturbing dreams. Light foods like bread, mild cheeses, and certain fruits were recommended for evening meals. Herbal sleep remedies were common and often quite effective. Poppy preparations were used for severe insomnia, though medieval physicians were aware of their potential dangers. Milder herbs like chamomile, lavender, and valerian were more commonly prescribed. These herbs were not just consumed but also used in sachets placed under pillows, burned as incense in sleeping chambers, or scattered on floors to release their scents when stepped on. The medieval understanding of sleep also included recognition of individual differences in sleep needs and patterns. Medical texts acknowledged that children required more sleep than adults, that elderly people often slept less deeply, and that certain occupations created specific sleep challenges. Scholars and scribes who worked by candlelight were prone to eye strain and headaches that interfered with rest. Soldiers and travelers needed strategies for sleeping in uncomfortable or dangerous conditions. Medieval physicians developed techniques for diagnosing sleep problems by examining patients' appearance, behavior, and reported dream content. A patient who appeared pale and sluggish might be diagnosed with excessive cold humors requiring warming treatments. Someone who seemed agitated and red-faced might have hot humors needing cooling interventions. Dream content was considered a valuable diagnostic tool, with certain types of dreams indicating specific imbalances or health problems. Supernatural sleep guardians. The medieval approach to sleep was inseparable from beliefs about the supernatural world that became active during the night hours. Medieval people lived in a cosmos populated by angels, demons, ghosts, fairies, and various spiritual entities that were believed to have particular interest in sleeping humans. This supernatural landscape shaped everything from bedtime prayers to the physical arrangement of sleeping spaces. Saint-based sleep protection was perhaps the most common form of supernatural security. Different saints were believed to specialize in different aspects of nighttime protection. Saint Dymphna protected against nightmares and mental disturbances during sleep. Saint Christopher guarded travelers who had to sleep in unfamiliar places. Saint Barbara protected against sudden death during sleep, a particular concern in an era when people regularly went to bed uncertain whether they would wake again. The cult of guardian angels provided another layer of supernatural sleep protection. Medieval angelology included detailed descriptions of how guardian angels functioned during sleep hours. These celestial beings were believed to stand watch over sleeping humans, protecting them from demonic attack and guiding their souls safely through the dangerous realm of dreams. Children were taught specific prayers to invoke their guardian angels before sleep, and many adults continued these practices throughout their lives. But not all supernatural sleep encounters were protective. Medieval folklore was filled with warnings about malevolent entities that preyed specifically on sleeping humans. The succubus and incubus were demons that appeared in dreams to seduce and corrupt their victims. These entities were believed to be particularly attracted to people who slept alone or who had engaged in sinful behavior before bedtime. Protection against such demons required not only prayer but also physical safeguards like blessed metals, holy water, and specific sleeping positions that supposedly prevented spiritual intrusion. Witchcraft beliefs created another layer of nighttime anxiety. Medieval people believed that witches could send their spirits to attack sleeping victims, causing illness, nightmares, or even death. Witch trials often included testimony about nocturnal spiritual attacks, with accusers claiming that they had been visited by the spectral forms of accused witches who pinched, scratched, or suffocated them in their sleep. These beliefs were so widespread that many communities developed elaborate protocols for protecting sleeping areas from witchcraft. The fairy world also intersected with medieval sleep in complex ways. Fairies were believed to be particularly active at night and were known for their interest in sleeping humans. Some fairy encounters were benevolent. House fairies might help with chores while the family slept, or fairy godmothers might visit sleeping children to bestow gifts or protection. But fairies could also be dangerous. They might steal sleeping babies, replacing them with changelings, or lead sleeping adults astray through enchanted dreams. Medieval ghost lore included numerous accounts of spirits that appeared specifically to sleeping people. These ghostly visitations often involved deceased family members or friends who returned to deliver important messages, seek prayer for their souls, or warn of impending dangers. Such encounters were taken very seriously, and medieval literature is filled with detailed accounts of ghostly communications that occurred during sleep or in the transitional state between sleep and waking. The timing of supernatural encounters was considered crucial. The hour just before midnight was believed to be when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was thinnest. This period, sometimes called the witching hour, was when demons were most active and spiritual protection was most needed. Many medieval people arranged their sleep schedules to avoid being in deep sleep during this dangerous time, preferring to be awake and praying until the danger had passed. Protective rituals for sleep were elaborate and varied by region and social class. Wealthy households might maintain blessed candles that burned throughout the night, providing both light and spiritual protection. Peasant families often placed iron objects near their beds, as iron was believed to repel fairy magic. Crosses made from rowan wood were hung over beds to ward off witches. Salt was sprinkled around sleeping areas to create protective barriers that evil spirits supposedly could not cross. The layout of medieval bedrooms often reflected supernatural concerns. Beds were positioned to avoid being directly aligned with doors or windows, which were considered entry points for malevolent spirits. Mirrors were covered or removed from sleeping areas because they were believed to provide portals through which demons could enter the physical world. Some households maintained elaborate blessing rituals that had to be repeated nightly to ensure continued protection. Medieval monastery dormitories included special architectural features designed to provide supernatural protection for sleeping monks. These might include blessed stones built into walls, holy relics placed in hidden compartments, or specific geometric patterns in floor tiles that were believed to create spiritually protective spaces. Some monasteries employed monks whose specific duty was to pray continuously throughout the night, providing a constant spiritual shield for their sleeping brothers. The intersection of medicine and supernatural belief created treatments for sleep disorders that combined practical remedies with spiritual interventions. A person suffering from chronic nightmares might be prescribed both herbal treatments and exorcism rituals. Someone who couldn't sleep might receive both dietary advice and blessed amulets. This holistic approach reflected the medieval understanding that physical and spiritual health were intimately connected. The politics of sleep. In the medieval world, sleep was never merely a personal matter. The timing, location, and circumstances of rest were deeply embedded in political structures that reflected and reinforced social hierarchies, power relationships, and community obligations. How, when, and where people slept communicated their status within the complex social order of medieval society. Royal sleep was perhaps the most politically charged form of rest in medieval culture. The king's bedtime was a state ceremony involving dozens of courtiers, each with specific roles in the ritual of preparing the monarch for sleep. The English royal court developed elaborate protocols for the king's coucher, a ceremony that could last several hours and included the formal presentation of the royal nightgown, the blessing of the royal bed, and the careful arrangement of guards and attendants who would watch over the sleeping sovereign. The politics of royal sleep extended to every aspect of the monarch's nocturnal routine. Who was permitted to remain in the king's presence during the bedtime ceremony was a mark of extraordinary favor. The officers responsible for the king's bedding held positions of enormous trust and influence, as they had access to the monarch during his most vulnerable hours. These positions were often hereditary, passed down through families who had served the crown for generations. Medieval queens faced different but equally complex political pressures around sleep. The queen's bed was a site of dynastic importance, as it was where royal heirs would be conceived and born. The arrangements for royal births included elaborate protocols for witnesses who would observe the queen during labor and delivery, ensuring that there could be no question about the legitimacy of royal children. The queen's sleeping chambers were often designed with hidden passages and secret doors that would allow trusted advisors and midwives to enter discreetly when needed. Noble households replicated royal protocols on a smaller scale. The lord's bedtime routine included ceremonies that reinforced his authority over his household and vassals. Servants would line up to receive final instructions for the night, guards would be posted at strategic locations, and the lord's most trusted advisors might be granted the privilege of attending him during his preparation for sleep. These rituals served practical purposes but also reinforced the social hierarchy that kept medieval society functioning. The politics of sleep also extended to marriage arrangements among the nobility. The wedding night was a political event as much as a personal one, with witnesses often present to ensure that the marriage was properly consummated. Bedding ceremonies involved elaborate rituals where the bride and groom were formally escorted to their wedding bed by their families and wedding party. These ceremonies served to publicly confirm the political alliance that the marriage represented. Medieval hospitality customs created complex political obligations around providing appropriate sleeping accommodations for guests. The quality of lodging offered to a visitor communicated the host's assessment of the guest's social status and political importance. Offering inferior sleeping arrangements could be interpreted as a deliberate insult, potentially leading to political conflicts or damaged relationships. Host families often bankrupted themselves trying to provide sufficiently impressive accommodations for important visitors. The communal sleeping arrangements common in medieval households also reflected political relationships. The positioning of sleeping spaces within the Great Hall followed strict hierarchical rules. Higher-ranking individuals slept closer to the central hearth, both for practical warmth and as a visible symbol of their status. Lower-ranking household members arranged themselves in order of their position within the household hierarchy, with the most junior servants sleeping closest to doors and windows. Guild politics influenced urban sleeping arrangements in medieval cities. Master craftsmen often provided sleeping space for their apprentices and journeymen, but the quality and location of these accommodations reflected the worker's position within the craft hierarchy. Senior apprentices might share the master's house, while junior workers slept in workshops or outbuildings. These arrangements served both practical and political purposes, reinforcing the authority relationships that kept guild systems functioning. Medieval monasteries developed complex political structures around communal sleeping arrangements. The positioning of individual sleeping spaces within monastery dormitories reflected religious hierarchy, with senior monks sleeping in preferred locations and junior members assigned less desirable spots. The abbot or prior often had a separate sleeping chamber that symbolized his administrative authority over the community. The politics of sleep also influenced legal systems in medieval society. Accusations of improper sleeping arrangements could be used as weapons in political conflicts. Enemies might spread rumors about inappropriate bed sharing or unseemly sleeping habits as ways of damaging political rivals. Church courts occasionally investigated cases involving allegedly improper sleeping arrangements, particularly those that might suggest sexual impropriety or violations of religious vows. Military campaigns created temporary political hierarchies that were reflected in sleeping arrangements. Commanders slept in the most protected and comfortable locations within military camps, while ordinary soldiers arranged themselves according to their rank and unit affiliations. The ability to provide good sleeping conditions for troops was considered a mark of successful leadership, and commanders who failed to ensure adequate rest for their men often faced political challenges to their authority. Medieval diplomatic missions included elaborate protocols for providing appropriate sleeping accommodations for foreign visitors. Embassies and trade delegations expected to be housed in ways that reflected their home nation's political status and the importance of ongoing diplomatic relationships. Failure to provide sufficiently impressive lodgings could be interpreted as a diplomatic slight with serious political consequences. The ritual bath before bed. Medieval bathing practices before sleep were far more elaborate and meaningful than simple hygiene routines. The evening bath was a complex ritual that combined practical cleansing with spiritual purification, social display, and medical therapy. These practices varied dramatically across social classes, but shared common elements that reflected medieval beliefs about the relationship between physical cleanliness and spiritual health. Among the wealthy, the evening bath was a ceremony that could take hours to complete. Medieval bathing required extensive preparation, as water had to be heated over fires and transported to bathing areas in large quantities. Wealthy households maintained specialized servants whose primary responsibility was managing the complex logistics of regular bathing. These bath attendants knew the precise temperatures preferred by different family members, the correct combinations of herbs and oils for different seasons and health conditions, and the proper rituals for blessing bath water. The medieval bathtub was often a work of art as well as a functional object. Wooden tubs were lined with linen sheets to prevent splinters and provide comfort. Some wealthy households owned metal bathtubs made of copper or even silver, which were believed to have therapeutic properties. The tub was typically positioned near a fireplace for warmth and surrounded by curtains or screens to provide privacy and prevent drafts. Medieval bath preparations included a complex pharmacology of herbs, oils, and other additives believed to promote health, beauty, and spiritual well-being. Lavender was added for its calming properties and pleasant scent. Rose petals were believed to promote beauty and attract positive spiritual influences. Chamomile was used to soothe skin and encourage restful sleep. More exotic additives might include imported spices, rare oils, or even ground pearls and precious stones for those who could afford such luxury. The process of medieval bathing followed specific sequences designed to maximize both physical and spiritual benefits. Bathers typically began by washing their hair with specialized preparations that might include egg yolks, herbal extracts, or even wine. The hair was then rinsed with scented water and carefully dried near the fire. Body washing followed a specific pattern, typically beginning with the face and working downward, with particular attention paid to hands and feet, which were considered especially susceptible to spiritual contamination. Medieval medical texts provided detailed instructions for therapeutic bathing that was specifically designed to promote good sleep. Patients suffering from insomnia might be prescribed baths containing specific combinations of herbs that were believed to balance their humoral constitution. Those prone to nightmares were advised to bathe in water that had been blessed by priests, or that contained protective herbs like vervain or St. John's wort. Religious aspects of medieval bathing were particularly important before sleep. Many people incorporated prayers into their bathing rituals, seeing the physical act of cleansing as preparation for spiritual purification during sleep. Bath water was sometimes blessed by priests, and some households maintained small altars in their bathing areas where prayers could be offered during the cleansing process. The social aspects of medieval bathing created opportunities for political and economic networking that extended far beyond simple hygiene. Wealthy women often bathed together, using these intimate gatherings to discuss family matters, arrange marriages, and conduct the informal diplomacy that was crucial to medieval aristocratic life. Men's bathing gatherings served similar functions, providing opportunities for political discussion and business arrangements in relaxed, private settings. Medieval public bathhouses, common in larger towns and cities, created different but equally complex social environments around evening bathing. These establishments often operated on elaborate schedules that segregated different social classes and genders into separate bathing periods. The quality of service, water temperature, and amenities varied dramatically based on customers' ability to pay and social status. The economics of medieval bathing created entire industries around evening cleansing rituals. Soap makers developed specialized products for different types of bathing, from harsh lye soaps for basic cleansing to delicate preparations made with olive oil and herbs for wealthy customers. Herb gatherers supplied the plants and flowers used in bath preparations. Specialized furniture makers created bathing tubs, washing stands, and the various accessories needed for elaborate bathing rituals. Medieval bathing also included post-bath rituals that were considered essential preparation for sleep. After leaving the bath, bathers were typically wrapped in warmed linen sheets and seated near a fire for gradual cooling. Hair was carefully dried and arranged according to fashion and social customs. Skin was often treated with oils or lotions that were believed to have protective or therapeutic properties. The timing of medieval evening baths was precisely calculated based on medical theories about digestion, circulation, and humoral balance. Bathing too soon after eating was believed to be dangerous, as it might interfere with digestion. Bathing too close to bedtime was also discouraged, as the body needed time to adjust its temperature and humoral balance before sleep. Most medieval bathing guides recommended completing the evening bath at least 2 hours before retiring to bed. Seasonal variations in medieval bathing practices reflected both practical constraints and medical theories about the relationship between bathing and health. Summer bathing might include cooling herbs and longer soaking times, while winter baths were designed to warm the body and included heating spices and shorter exposure to water. Spring and autumn bathing rituals often included herbs believed to help the body adjust to changing seasonal conditions. Medieval children's bathing before sleep followed different protocols designed for their supposedly more delicate constitutions. Children's bath water was typically cooler than that used for adults, and their bathing rituals were shorter and less elaborate. However, children's baths often included additional spiritual protections, such as blessed oils or amulets, as children were believed to be particularly vulnerable to spiritual attack during sleep. Medieval sleep disorders and their cures. Medieval understanding of sleep disorders reflected a complex blend of medical theory, religious belief, and practical observation that created treatment approaches unlike anything in modern medicine. Medieval physicians and healers recognized numerous sleep-related ailments and developed elaborate therapeutic regimens that addressed both the physical and spiritual dimensions of nighttime disturbances. Medieval medical texts describe a condition called morbus caducus nocturnus, roughly translated as the falling sickness of night, which encompassed various forms of sleep disruption including what we would now recognize as sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and periodic limb movement disorder. These conditions were understood through the lens of humoral theory, with treatments designed to rebalance the patient's constitutional temperament rather than addressing specific physiological mechanisms. Insomnia, known in medieval Latin as vigilia, was one of the most commonly discussed sleep disorders in medieval medical literature. Medieval physicians recognized several distinct types of insomnia based on their supposed underlying causes. Vigilia callida was hot insomnia, caused by excessive heat in the brain and treated with cooling foods, cold compresses, and sedative herbs. Vigilia frigida was cold insomnia, attributed to insufficient heat in the body and treated with warming spices, heated stones placed in the bed, and stimulating exercises performed before bedtime. The treatment of medieval insomnia often involved elaborate lifestyle modifications that address diet, exercise, environment, and spiritual practices. Patients might be prescribed specific meal schedules, with heavy foods forbidden after midday and light suppers of easily digestible fare. Exercise recommendations were carefully calibrated to the patient's constitution, with gentle walking prescribed for some patients while others were advised to engage in more vigorous activities like dancing or horseback riding. Medieval nightmare disorders, called oppressio nocturna or night oppression, were often attributed to demonic attack or spiritual corruption. Treatments combined medical interventions with religious remedies. Patients might receive herbal preparations to balance their humors while simultaneously undergoing exorcism rituals or intensive prayer therapy. Some medieval texts describe specialized blessing ceremonies designed to protect sleeping spaces from demonic intrusion. Sleepwalking, known as ambulatio nocturna, was considered particularly dangerous in medieval understanding because it was believed that the soul partially left the body during these episodes, making the individual vulnerable to spiritual possession. Treatment protocols for sleepwalkers included both physical restraints, such as tying the patient to their bed or placing barriers around their sleeping area, and spiritual protections including blessed amulets worn during sleep and continuous prayers recited by family members throughout the night. Medieval physicians also recognized a condition they called somnus mortalis or death-like sleep, which probably encompassed what we would now identify as narcolepsy, severe depression with hypersomnia, and certain types of catatonia. Patients with this condition were believed to be under supernatural influence, with their souls trapped in liminal states between life and death. Treatment involved complex rituals designed to call the soul back to full consciousness, including the burning of specific incenses, the ringing of blessed bells near the patient's head, and the performance of elaborate prayer sequences. Night terrors, described in medieval texts as timor nocturnus, were understood as attacks by malevolent spirits that fed on human fear and psychological distress. Children were considered particularly susceptible to these attacks, and medieval texts describe specialized protective rituals for young patients. Parents might place iron crosses under the child's mattress, burn protective herbs in the sleeping chamber, or maintain vigil prayers throughout the night until the terrors subsided. Medieval medicine also recognized sleep disorders related to what they called phantasmata, or false visions during sleep. These encompassed various types of hallucinations, both hypnagogic, occurring while falling asleep, and hypnopompic, occurring while waking up. Treatment protocols for phantasmata involved both dietary modifications, avoiding foods that were believed to generate vapors that could cloud the mind, and spiritual interventions including confession, penance, and participation in special masses designed to cleanse the soul of corrupting influences. The medieval understanding of sleep paralysis, called oppressio demonum or demonic oppression, was entirely supernatural. Patients reported feeling crushed by invisible weights, unable to move or speak, and sometimes experiencing terrifying hallucinations of demonic figures. Treatment involved elaborate exorcism rituals, the blessing of sleeping spaces with holy water and incense, and the placement of religious relics around the bed to create protective barriers against spiritual attack. Medieval sleep medicine also included recognition of what they called somnolentia melancholica, a condition that encompassed various forms of depression-related sleep disturbance. Patients with this condition might sleep excessively during the day while experiencing insomnia at night, or might experience what medieval texts describe as unrefreshing sleep that left them tired and listless regardless of how long they rested. Treatment involved complex regimens designed to rebalance the melancholic humor, including dietary changes, exercise prescriptions, music therapy, and herbal preparations. The seasonal variation of sleep disorders was well recognized in medieval medicine. Physicians noted that certain sleep problems were more common during specific times of the year and developed seasonal treatment protocols accordingly. Winter sleep disorders were often attributed to excess cold and moisture in the body and treated with warming herbs and foods. Summer sleep problems were blamed on excessive heat and dryness and treated with cooling remedies and dietary modifications. Medieval medical texts also describe various sleep-related breathing disorders, though they understood these conditions through humoral theory rather than modern respiratory physiology. Patients who snored loudly or appeared to stop breathing during sleep were believed to have obstructions in their spiritual pathways rather than physical airways. Treatments included positioning the patient's head in specific orientations believed to facilitate proper flow of spiritual energy, using aromatic herbs to clear the vapors from the respiratory passages, and performing breathing exercises designed to strengthen the patient's vital force. The medieval bedroom pharmacy. Medieval bedrooms were equipped with extensive collections of medicinal herbs, potions, and therapeutic devices that transformed sleeping spaces into personal hospitals. The medieval approach to health emphasized prevention over treatment, and the hours before sleep were considered crucial for maintaining the delicate balance of humors that determined overall well-being. Every well-appointed medieval bedroom contained what physicians called a dormitorium pharmacum, or sleeping pharmacy. These collections included dried herbs stored in specially blessed containers, bottles of medicinal wines and tinctures, aromatic sachets designed to be placed under pillows or scattered on floors, and various devices for delivering therapeutic vapors during sleep. The most common medieval sleep aids were herbal preparations that were far more sophisticated than simple folk remedies. Medieval physicians developed complex formulations that combined multiple plants based on elaborate theories about how different herbs interacted with each other and with the patient's individual constitution. A typical sleep formula might include poppy seeds for their sedative properties, lavender for calming the mind, chamomile for soothing the stomach, and valerian for promoting deep rest. Medieval sleep medicine also included various forms of aromatherapy that filled bedrooms with therapeutic scents throughout the night. Braziers containing smoldering herbs were placed near beds, filling the sleeping area with medicinal vapors that patients inhaled throughout their rest. Different herb combinations were used for different conditions. Frankincense and myrrh for spiritual protection, rosemary and thyme for mental clarity, and rose petals and jasmine for emotional tranquility. The medieval practice of pillow medicine involved stuffing pillows and mattresses with therapeutic herbs rather than simple straw or feathers. These herbal filling combinations were carefully formulated based on the sleeper's individual health needs and changed seasonally to address different medical challenges. Spring pillow herbs might include cleansing plants like nettle and dandelion, while winter preparations emphasized warming herbs like ginger and cinnamon. Medieval bedrooms also contained various mechanical devices designed to promote health during sleep. Copper bracelets were worn to bed to prevent joint pain and rheumatism. Magnetic stones were placed under mattresses to align the body's supposed magnetic field with beneficial cosmic forces. Some wealthy individuals slept with specially crafted crystals and gemstones that were believed to have therapeutic properties when worn or placed nearby during rest. The practice of medieval sleep bleeding involved controlled bloodletting performed just before bedtime to rebalance the patient's humors and promote restful sleep. This procedure was typically performed by trained physicians or barber surgeons using specialized instruments designed to make small, precise cuts that would drain just enough blood to achieve the desired therapeutic effect. Patients would sleep with special bandages that controlled bleeding throughout the night. Medieval physicians also prescribed therapeutic positioning devices designed to maintain optimal body alignment during sleep. These included wooden blocks placed under specific parts of the body to elevate limbs, specially shaped pillows designed to support the neck in particular positions, and restraining devices that prevented patients from assuming sleeping positions that were believed to be harmful to their health. The medieval bedroom pharmacy also included various topical preparations applied before sleep. These ranged from simple herbal oils rubbed on the skin to complex ointments containing dozens of ingredients. Some preparations were designed to be absorbed through the skin during sleep, while others were intended to provide protective barriers against harmful environmental influences or spiritual attacks. Medieval sleep medicine included the use of therapeutic music and sounds designed to promote rest and healing. Some bedrooms contained wind chimes or bells that created gentle sounds throughout the night. Wealthy individuals might employ musicians to play soft melodies during the transition from wakefulness to sleep. These musical interventions were believed to harmonize the patient's spiritual vibrations and promote deeper, more restorative rest. The timing of medieval bedtime medications followed precise schedules based on astrological calculations and humoral theory. Different medicines were administered at different times relative to sunset, the patient's last meal, and various astronomical events. Some preparations were taken immediately before sleep, while others were consumed hours earlier to allow time for proper absorption and humoral integration. Medieval physicians also prescribed various forms of hydrotherapy that could be administered in bedroom settings. These included warm compresses applied to specific body parts, foot soaks in medicated water, and steam treatments delivered through portable devices that allowed patients to inhale therapeutic vapors while remaining in bed. The politics of shared sleep. Medieval sleeping arrangements created complex social dynamics that extended far beyond simple practical considerations. The medieval bed was a political space where hierarchies were negotiated, alliances formed, and power relationships expressed through the intimate act of shared rest. These arrangements reflected and reinforced the social structures that organized medieval society. Marriage beds in medieval aristocratic households were sites of both intimacy and political theater. The marital sleeping arrangement was carefully observed by household members, visiting dignitaries, and family allies who interpreted every detail for clues about the couple's relationship, political alliances, and dynastic prospects. The side of the bed each spouse occupied, their sleeping positions relative to each other, and even their nighttime clothing choices were scrutinized for political significance. Medieval marriage customs included elaborate protocols for bed sharing that reflected the political dimensions of aristocratic unions. New brides were formally introduced to their husband's bed through ceremonies that involved both families and symbolically transferred the woman from her father's political protection to her husband's authority. These bedding ceremonies were political events as much as personal ones, marking the formal beginning of new alliance relationships between noble houses. The practice of noble guests sharing beds with their hosts created opportunities for diplomatic communication that bypassed formal court protocols. Important political negotiations sometimes took place during these intimate sleeping arrangements, allowing rulers and ambassadors to discuss sensitive matters in private settings where conversations couldn't be overheard by court officials or rival factions. Medieval monasteries developed complex hierarchies around communal sleeping that reflected religious and administrative structures. Senior monks were assigned sleeping spaces that provided more privacy, comfort, and protection from disturbances. Junior members of monastic communities slept in less desirable locations and were subject to stricter supervision during nighttime hours. These arrangements reinforced authority relationships while also serving practical functions related to community management. The medieval practice of masters sharing sleeping spaces with apprentices and servants created intimate but hierarchical relationships that shaped social and economic structures. These arrangements involved complex obligations and expectations on both sides. Masters were expected to provide protection, guidance, and appropriate sleeping conditions for their dependents. Apprentices and servants were expected to be available for assistance during nighttime hours, while also respecting their master's privacy and authority. Medieval household sleeping arrangements during times of illness or crisis became opportunities for demonstrating loyalty, devotion, and political allegiance. Family members and close associates who volunteered to share sleeping spaces with sick or dying individuals made public statements about their relationships and commitments. These vigil arrangements often had significant inheritance and succession implications. The medieval and created temporary communities, where sleeping arrangements reflected broader social hierarchies, while also providing opportunities for social mobility and cross-class interaction. Traveling merchants might find themselves sharing beds with minor nobles, creating informal networking opportunities that could lead to business partnerships or political connections. These temporary sleeping arrangements allowed individuals to observe and learn social customs from higher social classes. Medieval military campaigns created sleeping hierarchies that reflected both formal military rank and informal leadership relationships. Commanders who shared their sleeping spaces with trusted subordinates created bonds of loyalty and communication that extended far beyond the immediate military situation. These intimate arrangements often determined political alignments and career opportunities long after specific campaigns ended. The practice of medieval royal households included elaborate protocols around access to royal sleeping areas that functioned as complex political currencies. The privilege of remaining in the royal presence during bedtime ceremonies was a mark of extraordinary favor that could make or destroy political careers. Competition for these intimate access opportunities created intricate court politics centered around nighttime routines. Medieval marriage negotiations often included specific clauses about sleeping arrangements that reflected political considerations as much as personal preferences. These agreements might specify which household the couple would sleep in, how their sleeping space would be furnished and maintained, and what obligations each spouse had regarding nighttime availability to their partner and their respective families. The medieval church developed complex theological positions on shared sleep that influenced both religious and secular sleeping arrangements. Church teachings about appropriate sleeping configurations shaped household organization, marriage customs, and religious community structures, while also creating opportunities for political control through the regulation of intimate relationships. Sleep and the medieval economy of time. Medieval concepts of time created unique relationships between sleep, work, and social obligation that bore no resemblance to modern scheduling. The medieval day was structured around religious observances, agricultural necessities, and social customs that created sleep patterns determined by community needs rather than individual preferences. The medieval agricultural calendar created seasonal sleep rhythms that varied dramatically throughout the year. During planting and harvest periods, entire communities operated on shared sleep schedules that maximized labor availability during crucial agricultural windows. Farmers developed techniques for power sleeping that allowed them to work intensive schedules for weeks at a time, followed by periods of extended rest when agricultural demands decreased. Medieval craft production operated on cycles that required workers to coordinate their sleep schedules with production demands and resource availability. Blacksmiths often worked through the night when iron was at optimal temperature for forging, catching sleep during daylight hours when furnaces cooled. Bakers began work before dawn to provide fresh bread for morning markets, sleeping during afternoon hours when their ovens were cooling for the next day's production cycle. The medieval church created temporal frameworks that organized community sleep patterns around religious observances. The canonical hours divided each day into periods of prayer, work, and rest that provided structure for both religious and secular communities. Even households that didn't strictly observe monastic schedules often organized their daily routines around the bells that marked these religious time periods. Medieval market schedules created sleep patterns that varied based on trade cycles and seasonal economic activities. Merchants who traveled to periodic markets might stay awake for days during intensive trading periods, followed by extended rest periods during travel between market locations. Local traders adjusted their sleep schedules to coincide with the arrival of merchant caravans and the fluctuating demands of seasonal commerce. The medieval practice of watch duty created shared sleep systems within households and communities that ensured continuous security while allowing individuals to rest. Guards, shepherds, and household servants developed rotation schedules that allowed essential work to continue throughout the night while providing adequate rest for all participants. These systems required sophisticated coordination and mutual trust among community members. Medieval guild systems created sleep schedules that reflected professional hierarchies and production requirements. Master craftsmen often maintained irregular sleep patterns that allowed them to supervise work during optimal production hours, while also meeting social obligations related to guild governance and community leadership. Apprentices and journeymen adjusted their rest schedules to accommodate their master's needs, while also fulfilling their training requirements. The medieval legal system created time obligations that influenced sleep patterns through court schedules, legal deadlines, and administrative requirements. Lawyers, judges, and court officials often worked irregular hours that required flexibility in sleep scheduling. Legal cases that involved travel to different jurisdictions created additional scheduling challenges that required adaptation to local customs and timing requirements. Medieval religious pilgrimage created temporary communities with shared sleep schedules based on travel requirements, religious observances, and group security needs. Pilgrims developed cooperative systems that allowed group members to rest while maintaining vigilance against robbers, wild animals, and other travel dangers. These arrangements required significant coordination and mutual support among strangers from different social backgrounds. The medieval practice of seasonal employment created sleep pattern disruptions that required workers to constantly adjust their rest schedules based on available work opportunities. Agricultural workers might sleep in barns during harvest season, in urban workshops during winter craft production periods, and in temporary shelters while traveling between employment locations. Medieval household management required careful coordination of sleep schedules among family members, servants, and guests to ensure that essential work continued throughout the day and night. Wealthy households developed complex systems that assigned different family members and servants to different time periods, ensuring that someone was always available to manage household operations while others rested. The architecture of dreams. Medieval understanding of dreams went far beyond simple interpretation of symbolic content. Medieval scholars, physicians, and theologians developed elaborate theories about how the physical environment could influence dream content, spiritual significance, and prophetic accuracy. This knowledge shaped the design and arrangement of sleeping spaces in ways that seem exotic to modern sensibilities. Medieval bedroom orientation followed precise astronomical principles designed to optimize dream reception and spiritual communication. The ideal medieval bedroom was positioned so that the sleeper's head pointed east toward Jerusalem and the rising sun, symbolically aligning the dreaming mind with divine influences. Windows were placed to capture the first rays of dawn, which were believed to carry particular spiritual potency that could enhance the clarity and significance of late-night dreams. The medieval practice of dream architecture involved arranging bedroom contents to create environments that would encourage specific types of dreams. Individuals seeking prophetic dreams might arrange religious artifacts, blessed candles, and holy relics around their sleeping area to attract divine communication. Those hoping to dream of deceased loved ones might place personal items belonging to the departed near their beds to facilitate spiritual contact. Medieval dream theory included sophisticated understanding of how sensory input during sleep could influence dream content. Physicians recommended specific arrangements of aromatic herbs, gentle sounds, and visual elements that would create dream environments conducive to healing, spiritual insight, or problem-solving. Some individuals maintained elaborate systems of rotating sensory elements based on their current needs and circumstances. The medieval bedroom often included dedicated spaces for dream recording and interpretation. Wealthy individuals might maintain dream journals using specially blessed ink and paper that were believed to preserve the spiritual significance of recorded dreams. Some bedrooms included small altars or prayer areas where dreamers could offer thanks for significant dreams or seek protection from disturbing nocturnal visions. Medieval religious communities developed communal dream practices that involved shared sleeping arrangements designed to encourage collective spiritual experiences. Some monasteries arranged dormitories so that monks with reputations for prophetic dreaming slept in central locations where their spiritual influence could benefit nearby sleepers. These arrangements reflected beliefs about how spiritual gifts could be transmitted through proximity during sleep. The practice of medieval dream incubation involved creating highly specific sleeping environments designed to encourage dreams related to particular questions or problems. Individuals might fast for prescribed periods, maintain specific prayer schedules, and arrange their sleeping spaces with carefully selected religious artifacts before seeking divine guidance through dreams. These practices were often conducted under the supervision of religious advisors or physicians who specialized in dream therapy. Medieval physicians developed theories about how bedroom temperature, humidity, and air circulation affected dream content and quality. They believed that different atmospheric conditions encouraged different types of dreams and prescribed specific environmental modifications for patients seeking particular types of nocturnal experiences. These recommendations included elaborate instructions for ventilation, heating, and the use of various devices to modify bedroom atmospherics. The medieval understanding of dream timing led to complex scheduling practices around sleep and dream interpretation. Certain hours of the night were believed to be more conducive to prophetic dreams, while others were associated with demonic deception or meaningless mental activity. Many individuals arranged their sleep schedules to maximize their chances of experiencing significant dreams during optimal time periods. Medieval dream architecture also included provisions for protection from negative spiritual influences that might corrupt dream content or spiritual communication. Bedrooms were blessed using elaborate rituals that might take several hours to complete and involve multiple clergy members. These blessings created spiritual barriers that were believed to filter out harmful influences while allowing beneficial spiritual communication to reach the sleeping individual. The medieval practice of group dreaming involved family members or religious communities who arranged their sleeping spaces to encourage shared dream experiences. These arrangements were based on beliefs about how spiritual communication could be enhanced through collective receptivity and mutual support among dreamers. Some households developed complex protocols for sharing and interpreting dreams that occurred during these communal sleeping arrangements. Conclusion: the rhythm of medieval night. As our journey through the strange world of medieval sleep comes to an end, we find ourselves in a time when night was not simply the absence of day, but a completely different realm of existence. Medieval people didn't just go to sleep. They entered into a complex world of spiritual preparation, communal arrangement, physical therapy, and supernatural navigation that transformed every night into an elaborate ritual of survival and connection. The medieval approach to sleep reveals a civilization that understood rest as far more than physical recuperation. Sleep was spiritual practice, political statement, medical treatment, and social bond, all woven together into nightly routines that sustained not just individuals but entire communities through the challenges of medieval existence. Their sleep was segmented by prayer bells and divided by watch duties. Their beds were shared spaces where hierarchies were negotiated and intimacies carefully regulated. Their dreams were messages from other realms that required interpretation and response. Their nighttime preparations involved elaborate pharmacies of herbs, blessed objects, and protective rituals that turned each bedroom into a personal sanctuary. Medieval people slept surrounded by their communities, protected by their prayers, and guided by traditions that connected them to cosmic rhythms larger than any individual life. They understood sleep as a vulnerable state that required careful preparation and community support. They saw dreams as meaningful communications that deserved serious attention and interpretation. In our modern world of individual bedrooms, climate control, and 8-hour sleep schedules, the medieval approach to rest might seem impractical or superstitious. But beneath their elaborate rituals and complex beliefs was a profound understanding that sleep is not merely a biological necessity, but a fundamental human experience that connects us to our communities, our spiritual lives, and the mysterious rhythms that govern all existence. As you drift toward sleep tonight, perhaps you can sense something of what medieval people experienced during their nightly rituals. The quiet transition from the active world of day into the receptive realm of night. The gradual settling of the mind as consciousness prepares to journey into dreams. The sense of joining a human tradition that stretches back through countless generations of sleepers who found their rest through community, ritual, and faith in something larger than themselves. The medieval world may be gone, but the human need for meaningful rest continues. Their elaborate bedtime preparations remind us that sleep is not just unconsciousness but transformation. Their communal sleeping arrangements suggest that rest is not just individual recuperation but collective renewal. Their spiritual practices around sleep point toward dimensions of nightly experience that our efficient modern world has perhaps forgotten. In the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the gradual relaxation of your body, in the slow drift of your thoughts toward dreams, you participate in the same fundamental human experience that carried medieval people through their nights of prayer, community, and hope. Sleep well, knowing that you join a tradition of sleepers that stretches back through centuries of humans who found their rest through preparation, protection, and faith in the healing power of night. The darkness that surrounds you now is the same darkness that embraced medieval sleepers in their strange beds, surrounded by their communities, protected by their prayers, and guided by their elaborate rituals toward rest. Let their wisdom about the sacred nature of sleep carry you gently into dreams, where the ancient mysteries of night continue their eternal dance between consciousness and peace, between the known world of waking and the infinite possibilities that await in sleep.